Welcome back to Capitol View. I'm Roby Brock.
And I'm David Goins. We now have our political long table, if you will. We're joined by David Ramsey from the Arkansas Times and Russellville Representative, third-termer Representative Andrea Lea. Thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having us.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about this recently wrapped up legislative session. We were all up there together when our deodorant had obviously run out. We got to know each other way too well, I think. So anyhow, but just kind of what kind of relief do you think is out there, Representative Lea, in terms of the session being over and the fact that the accomplishments that you feel like you've made?
I think the first couple days you're out of session, you just kind of sit in awe. You know, it takes you a few minutes. You know, first you do your laundry, you mow your lawn, you catch up with your regular stuff. But it was quite a session. It was long and it was arduous, that's for sure. Yeah,
Dave, now you were in the weeds with me and David on a lot of stuff there in terms of just the backstory of what's going on in healthcare. Is that going to be the defining issue of this legislative session?
Oh, I don't think there's any doubt. I think everyone knew from the get-go it was the biggest issue. It was both in terms of impact to the state and also it was a very complicated issue. The political process to get it done was very complicated. If it doesn't pass, I think we view the session very differently. But when it did finally pass, you know, I think it's by far the most dramatic impact in terms of the state that the legislature did this session.
As the session went on, Representative Lea, it was pretty obvious from both House and Senate Republicans that just a straight up Medicaid expansion wasn't really something you were interested in. When Bibi came back from Washington after meeting with Catherine Sebelius and said, look, we have this option, at that point were you okay, or what other steps needed to go into it before you supported it?
Yeah, it took me a little bit longer to get okay with it. That's for sure. But when you have someone like Jonathan Dismang, you know, David Sanders, you've got John Burris, you've got Bruce Westerman working on something, those are some people that I can really trust. And when I sat down and started visiting with them about the promises they got or they felt they got, I started feeling better about it, that's for sure.
Dave, I've joked that it was like, you know, almost like Nixon to China. I mean, you had these guys with a lot of conservative cred, and I think that them being behind it and working on it was a big difference maker.
Yeah. So you think that, was there ever a point in the session, Representative Lea, where you thought you were not going to be able to go along with it? And eventually Representative Westerman peeled off on his support for that bill. What happened at that turning point?
And I can't speak for Representative Westerman, I can't speak for Bruce and what caused him to make that turn. Yes, for me, I went into the session absolutely against any form of Medicaid expansion, no doubt about it. The turning point definitely was those gentlemen sitting down and having a conversation with me. They still assumed I was a no up until I pushed the button, actually.
Wow.
And you know, the irony of it is that you had in Senator Dismang, Senator Sanders, Representative Burris, early on making arguments against Medicaid expansion. And in doing that, that kind of opened the door to some possibilities. Well, we won't do this, but, and I think that the governor, to his credit, and those guys to their credit, worked together to find something that everyone could be happy with. In terms of Representative Westerman, you know, I do think a little bit of what happened is as you got closer to the vote, you had more of the right wing of the party, whether it be Americans for Prosperity or the Tea Party coming out against it. I think to some extent Representative Westerman probably saw a political opportunity to kind of get to the right of some of the folks that were working on developing what became the private option.
And just for the record, Americans for Prosperity is not part of the party. Let's remember their third think tank out there.
Absolutely.
Just throwing that out there, Davey.
Fair enough, but I would say that they are a source of institutional support for the party. They do spend a lot of money in campaigns, and I have a feeling that Republican lawmakers may listen to them from time to time.
You're missing all their facial expressions.
I know.
Just keep your back turned.
Good dialogue right there. Yeah.
So what happens next in the healthcare debate? What happens to move this thing forward?
Well, we've got to get permission basically from Washington. They've got to sign off on all that we've asked for, which is the most conservative package put in front of them. If they don't, then we go back to square one.
And it was designed as a take it or leave it offer to the feds, and I think that was very important to the Republicans that worked on this. And my impression is I think it is highly likely HHS and DHS have been in a lot of communication. I think it's highly likely that they're going to accept the proposal, in part because I think that they do see this as a way forward potentially for expansion in other parts of the South. You're going to have a situation where a lot of places that have conservative majorities don't want to do expansion. maybe this private option style, this kind of experiment in Arkansas will be a way forward for some of those states.
But along with the expansion, let's not forget, we got a lot of Medicaid reform, and that's what we were looking for. And if that expands, that's a good thing.
Yeah, that's a good place to at least hold for now. We'll join you on the next block, talk a little bit more about the end of the session, as well as some thoughts from Speaker Carter and the governor when we come back, more with that political roundtable, including what else the 89th General Assembly should be remembered for. I'm David Goins alongside Roby Brock, and you're watching Capitol View on this Sunday morning on KARK.
Farm Bureau helps protect its members in more ways than you might think. They've always been the voice of agriculture in Arkansas, working on behalf of folks like me when nobody else would. And Farm Bureau stands for the values that Arkansas families care about. They've protected my right to farm and make a living, which helps everybody who likes food on the table. You know what they say, Arkansas counts on agriculture, and agriculture counts on Farm Bureau.
Welcome back to Capitol View. I'm Roby Brock.
And I'm David Goins, rejoined now by our political, I'm calling it a long table because this table, in fact, is long.
Representative,
that's right.
Feels it. Yeah.
Representative Andrea Lea and David Ramsey, the Arkansas Times. Thanks for joining us. Let's listen to a couple quotes from Tuesday when the session wrapped up from Governor Beebe as well as Speaker Carter, just their thoughts on, first, legislation from Governor Beebe and the idea of private option success and failure from Speaker Carter.
There were bills that were passed that I vetoed that I thought should not have been passed, but that's part of the process. Nobody gets their way all the time.
I've been pretty optimistic the whole time that we were going to get it. Didn't know how we were going to do it, but I always felt like we'd get it done.
And that's Carter talking about the private option. And about 2-3 hours later, Governor Beebe went ahead and vetoed three more bills. I guess your thoughts on where this session ended up as far as maybe some of those vetoes. I mean, that was something we talked about early in the session with the 3 vetoes from the governor and then 3 more at the end. Your thoughts on basically it was the Brian King legislation package that he vetoed, Representative Lee.
You're pointing to me, okay. I knew those had some difficulties. They were in my committee, state agencies. I think it's interesting the timing of the vetoes was obviously placed so that the only time we can come back and override them, the possibility is at sine die. And that's always difficult because you don't always have a full complement that day.
And I mean, I think, you know, obviously most vetoes are going to be largely symbolic because it is so easy to overturn them. I think that from the perspective of the left, you know, Beebe picked sort of big picture issues or issues having to do with voting rights and that kind of thing that were ultimately kind of about making a statement. I mean, you know, I think if we think about Beebe's role in this legislature, you know, we keep circling back around to healthcare because it was the big issue. And I think that's where he kind of put all of his cards into that table. And ultimately, you know, he got what he wanted.
And let's not forget though that major play in Beebe's playbook that you're describing was led by under 40-something Republicans, conservative Republicans too. He had to go along with what they were doing. He had to. We had the majority. So.
Go ahead.
I would say when you come back on May 17th, do you think that veto override happens, or do you think those probably stand?
You know, I'm very curious about that one. Like I said, most people don't come back for sine die. You don't get 100 people back in there, so it remains to be seen.
I tend to agree with you on that. I've never seen them come back in full force and return for sine die like that. I think it's going to be very difficult to get 51 votes in the House to override.
And beyond just vetoes, let's remember that Governor Beebe didn't sign many bills this session. He just let them go into law without his signature too.
All right.
I found that interesting.
So back to the point of Beebe saying that everybody doesn't always get what they want to get. Did everybody get what they wanted to get in this session, Dave?
Well, of course not. And I mean, you know, the fact of the matter is Beebe was, for the first time in his career, working with a General Assembly that was majority Republican. Again, I think that from the perspective of Beebe and probably from the perspective of most Democrats, by far the big issue was health care. You know, and what they were able to do was take the makeup of the legislature was heavily against expansion. They managed to find a way forward and get it done.
All
conservatively.
That's right. Very good. Thank you very much for joining us both, Representative Andrea Lea, David Ramsey.
Come back anytime.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much.
You're on speed dial from now on. Very, very nice. Join us next Sunday at 8:30 a.m. for another edition of Capitol View. I'm David Goins.
I'm Roby Brock. We'll see you then.